And people answered the only thing that came close was the polio epidemics. In some small ways, COVID was similar to the polio epidemic. It's hard to compare them, but I'll tell you what I know. Anybody know how old polio is? Did it come in the 20s? Early 50s? Okay.
Earlier than that. Much earlier than that.
Okay.
But no vaccine.
It was an ancient virus. Egyptians had it. Romans had it. It's been around for a long time. And the way it spreads is in small little areas. I don't know that anybody knew it was polio or that it was a virus back in ancient times. Coronavirus, is new. That's only maybe a year old or so. Epidemics of polio didn't start until the 20th century. What was known about polio in 1945, which is the year I'm focusing on, was that it was usually an epidemic in a small regional spot in the summer, and it usually attacked children. They thought it might be contagious, but nobody was really sure how it spread. Municipal pools were often closed in the summer. They didn't want to be, but they closed because there was fear that the virus was being spread in the pools. Movie theaters were also closed, as they are today. We didn't wear masks. We didn't know enough about how it was caught. So the mothers worried about their kids and where they went and what they did, but we didn't know enough about how to protect ourselves. We didn't know the origin of the virus or how contagious it was in 1945. That was the year that it hit Green Pond. There was no vaccine for the polio virus. They started working on a vaccine for the virus in 1935.
Wow.
It took 20 years before they found a vaccine for the virus. I certainly hope that we do better with the coronavirus. I think science has come a long way, and hopefully we're not waiting for another 20 years. Okay, a little history. I'm going to have to talk about some of the things that affected us that year. World War II is still going on with Japan. We had ended the European phase. The Germans surrendered in May of 1945. Japan did not surrender until a few days after, and the anniversary is today. August 6th was the day we dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima, and they surrendered August 15th, 1945. Just because the European part of the war was over didn't mean that soldiers came home. Normalcy did not return. We were still rationed. Butter, sugar, meat, and of course gasoline. I have some of the books here. This is what a ration card looks like. This is what everybody had. And you went to a gas station and you got punched. I don't know what the limits were, but this card has been completely emptied. This is a World War II book, and that's what the stamps looked like. And I can remember my mother invited some friend of my sister's over for dinner. And she said, "What kind of meat are you having?" And she said, "Hot dogs is all I can afford." She said, "I don't eat those." So she didn't come. There was no choice. There were shortages of everything. There were no nylon stockings. Why? Parachutes. Parachutes. So we needed them for parachutes. There were very few cars made because steel was short. Cars at that time were made of steel, I guess, not aluminum. And the steel was used for tanks and planes and whatever else the war needed. I'm going to try and fill in the gap for people who either weren't alive in 1945 or who were not in Green Pond. There's a lot that has changed over the years. Life here was much simpler. For example, there were less houses. I'm going to call it the parking lot. The parking lot is Pleasant Avenue and Grove. That was not developed in 1945. The beach was public. So that was the parking lot for the beach, and the buses came and parked there. Life was, as I said, simple. There were no big houses on the East Shore, and you could walk up East Shore right in front of everybody's house, right across everybody's property. Nobody stopped you. I don't know, could you get further than 10, Russ? Or was that about it? Yeah. Anyway, you could get walking up past the first 10 houses. The biggest house here at Green Pond was the Principe house, which is opposite the log cabin, the big old farmhouse, the 2-story. That was owned by the Hoppers. And they were the only people pretty much who lived here year-round. The story about the Hoppers, they had a well in their backyard, and everybody walked past the well. They had a cup or a ladle there, and you could help yourself pump your own cup of water, and then you hung the cup back up. Nobody cared about germs, or nobody worried about who had drunk before them. Nobody washed it. As far as I know, it was always there. Our house was on Bonnie Brae. It's number 7. It was a prefab house from Sears Roebuck. It came up on the train to Newfoundland, and we don't know for sure because we didn't own it when it first came up in 1930. We think it was a horse-drawn cart that brought it up here, and it was assembled on the property. I'm going to give it a description of the house, our house, but our house was similar to most of the other houses. It had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a front and back porch. The bathroom was kind of off the back porch because it stunk. We were lucky to have a big farmhouse sink in the kitchen, and we were very luxurious. We had a copper cold water spigot. My next door neighbors had a hand pump. Many people had hand pumps in their kitchen. We had no cabinets. You had shelves. We were very fashionable, by the way, for 1930s. We had shelves which were covered with curtains. And every summer, the job of the kids was to come up and wash every dish, glass bowl plate because my mother said the mice had left their calling cards. She never referred to it as anything else but calling cards. We had an ice chest, no freezer, of course, and we would stop for ice at Hunkley's, which was on Green Pond Road, which later became Pete O'Neill's. We bought a big chunk of ice, and there was also an iceman who came around regularly. I don't know how often, once a week probably. We had a gas stove because nobody wanted to have an electric stove because you couldn't count on the electricity being operating every day. Yes, we're all going through that, aren't we? It was very cooperative of the weather to do what it's done, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. Bathrooms had a chemical toilet, which was like a porta-john, and yes, they smelled. Usually there was a tiny, I never saw sinks that small, tiny sink in the bathroom. If you were lucky enough to have a shower, it was outside, generally. People didn't have much in the way of bathrooms. This is important. The toilet waste went into what they called a vault. Not the kind you put valuables and money in, but this contained toilet waste. I'm not sure how they were made. I doubt that they were made of concrete. I think they were pits that were dug in your backyard.
Usually a hole in the ground with rocks. That's what
Right, yeah.
up in Highland Lakes.
Yep.
They were cesspools, they called them.
Yeah. Okay. Once a summer, the honey dipper would come. The honey dipper is what we called the guy who came to remove the waste. His name happened to be Charlie Search. Couldn't have been more appropriate. If you went to the docks on Saturday evening, you would see mostly men with ivory soap because it floats and a washcloth, and they were taking their Saturday bath in the lake. The girls were washing their hair because it made their hair feel silky. We didn't know that there was no safe soap or safe shampoo at that time. Fortunately, the corporation has ruled no soaps or shampoos in the lake. The phosphates, I believe, which are in soaps, cause algae bloom, or can cause algae bloom. Anyway, soap is not good for the lake. On Sundays, the Protestants went to the Little Brown Church on Notch Road. In 1945, the Catholics had Mass in what was called the Rec Room, which was what is now the Palmer Murphy Room or the Stand. That was a game room, and it had skee ball and some kind of horse racing game and tables where the guests could play bridge. We were not allowed, residents of Green Pond were not allowed to be in there. It was strictly for the hotel guests. St. Simon's was not built in 1945. It was built in 1946. The hotel was very popular during the war. Guests came up probably when school ended and people came with their kids, and they stayed until Labor Day. They were met at the train station. A lot of them came from New York, and they came up to Newfoundland, where they were met by the manager of the hotel, Louis Capon, in a Woody, one of those wooden station wagons with wood on the side, or we had a Jennings taxi cab. Life was simple. You could sit on the porch and rock, or the whole deck of the porch of the hotel was full of rocking chairs, and people sat and read magazines and newspapers. They did carry magazines and newspapers at the hotel. and you could rent a boat, a canoe, or a rowboat if you wanted to float around the lake. And we're not sure. I talked to several other people who are old like me. There was a skeet and rifle range beyond us, beyond the ball field. I think it was run by the hotel. I'm not positive, and nobody seems to know for sure. But as kids, we used to go up to collect the empty shells. They were copper and very collectible. I don't know how to weave all of this information together. I don't want to put anybody to sleep, but the war affected all of us. As a child, we were trained, anytime we heard a plane go overhead, to look up to see if there was a swastika or a sun on it. I don't know what we were supposed to do if we ever saw one. Hi, Mom, Dad, look, there's a plane, you know. Nobody told us what to do, but we all felt it was a part of the war effort to look. Describing life here, it was very, very different. The fathers usually only were here on weekends. We had the tremendous problem of the gas shortage. And my father would come up on a Friday evening, usually without the car. The car was for him to get to work and to the Victory Garden, which I'll talk about in a minute. But he would come up and either ride with the Jennings taxi or somebody else, the Woody, and he'd be here for the weekend. But when he came, he brought his suitcase, which was full of fresh vegetables from our Victory Garden. It was considered patriotic for you to have a Victory Garden, and we all worked in it until tilled the soil and stuff after school and on weekends until we came up here. But when we came up here the day school ended, and we stayed here until Labor Day. That meant that the men went home to work, and the women, the mothers, and the kids stayed here pretty much on their own. Very few, most everybody here didn't live here year-round, so we had a winter house that you could go to. Under the hotel was the grocery store and the post office. The grocery store had everything you could want: meat, dairy, bakery, canned goods, fresh vegetables. However, the most popular item was the big candy counter, and they had every brand of everything you ever thought of in your life, and the candy bars or gum were a nickel a piece. The only price I remember was a loaf of bread was 10 or 15 cents a loaf. The store had pretty much anything you could possibly want. Okay, back. Have I missed a page? You sure? Okay. Back in 1945, the rains came. And it rained for days and days and days. And it was, the streets became flooded, especially Shadyside and Sunnyside. Well, it was over a foot deep. Russ, is that right? Jim?
We've had that.
Over a foot deep. Cars could not get through. And one of the reasons we have problems is there is a stream, a creek, a brook, I don't know what you want to call it. When I was a kid, we used to fish and catch tadpoles behind the yacht club, where they brilliantly have put their septic system. Anyway, that stream went across Sunnyside, across Shadyside. I don't know who lives there now, but it was the Greens originally, the older Greens, Sue's grandparents, and then Ruth Landis bought the house. I don't know who lives in it now. Who?
D-A-H-L.
Dolls.
I live across the street in the lake.
Okay. Okay. Aren't you lucky? And the stream went all the way through.
Lagoon.
The stream went all the way through to Old Lane. I guess you all know there was no drinking in Green Pond. Did you know that? You couldn't have a liquor license. There was no drinking in the hotel. There was no drinking. Shogger's at the other end of the lake was very popular because they had a liquor license. Okay, back to the rains. They kept coming. We took canoes, rowboats, and lifeboats and thought it was a lot of fun to paddle around. As kids, it didn't bother us. We didn't think about it. Unfortunately, after several days, the sun came out and the floods receded. And there were no storm drains. There was no sewer. There was no way for the water to get away. And unfortunately, the marvelously built vaults overflowed with the groundwater, and they went into the lake. Everybody in Green Pond felt very safe. It was isolated. We weren't in New York City. We weren't thinking about any diseases or anything. The lake was clean. Everything was fine. Well, the toilet wastewater went into the lake. When the sun came out, my sister said, "I'm going for a swim. Why don't you come?" I put on my suit and I walked down to the dock and I looked at the water and I said, "The water looks yucky. It's brown and I don't like the looks of the lake." She said, "Oh, come on, it'll be fine." I did not swim. She did. Several days afterwards, my sister became very ill. She had a fever, blinding headache, vomiting, incredible pains, started in her toes and gradually went up all the way to her hips. She could not walk, she could not cough, she could not sneeze. Her diaphragm was affected, but nobody knew what was wrong with her. To add to the misery, we had no phone. My father was editor of the Bergen Evening Record, and he didn't want to be bothered when he was here on vacation, so we didn't have a phone. And you collected coins, and you went to the hotel. It had 6 telephone booths, and you could call. My mother called my father and told him we had a problem. Susie was very sick. And he said, "I can't get there. I don't have any gas stamps. I have no gas. I can't get there. I'll come up by train and we'll talk about it on the weekend." So he called the family doctor, and the family doctor said, "Oh, it's probably just a virus or a childhood disease. You know, they come and they go and kids get over them. It's nothing. Don't worry about it." It turns out that none of the doctors in the area had seen anybody with polio. We also had a rule at the time that you could not run a business from your home in Green Pond, which was a problem. There was no practicing doctor in Green Pond. I mean, there was a doctor who lived here, but he didn't have any kind of a room for examination or anything. Eventually, we took Susie to the doctor, and they pronounced it Guillain-Barré. They didn't know what it was. And she didn't get diagnosed for 3 or 4 weeks. One of the problems, or one of the causes of polio, is toilet waste. And that would happen in like tenements and so forth. That's why you would have a burst of maybe 10 kids getting sick in Butler or somewhere. I know there was a part of Denville that had some tenements, and a bunch of kids got sick there. You could get it from each other. It was contagious for sure. I was lucky I didn't get it, but I didn't swim either. There are 2 different kinds of polio, at least 2 different kinds. I worry about COVID and about how it could mutate also. Polio, some of them, people were affected with their lungs and they went into iron lungs. My sister was lucky she did not have that. But the muscle wasting, certainly she had, and never returned. She never walked again. She did eventually learn how to sneeze and cough, but she was always crippled. But she led a very normal life. She went to college, got a master's degree, and was happily married. And she didn't die of polio. So we did have, I'm not sure of the total, 5 or 6 people in Green Pond. Some of them are still living who got polio. We did have one gorgeous, most adorable 5-year-old girl with beautiful black curly hair who did die. We had one die of polio. I'm not sure about the East Shore. Without phones and much communication, it was very hard to know if there were any cases on the East Shore. I don't want to end the discussion on the death, so I'll talk about a few fun things about the war. Everybody suffered deprivations, but to a kid, one of the worst shortages was chocolate. There was none. And I don't know whether everybody knows, the stand was originally where the first aid group meets now. That was the ice cream stand. The only ice cream they could get during the war was banana. I have never eaten banana ice cream since. Oh, and the community house had out on the porch a cigarette machine. And my father would give me 20 cents. And I would go down and push the button for Camels. The package would come out, and inside the cellophane would be the change, which was 2 pennies. 18 cents for a package of cigarettes. Not now, no. I should have mentioned the community sings. You remember them, Russ?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, was it Saturday or Sunday night?
I think it was Sunday.
I think it was Sunday too.
One of the blocks used to run it quite a bit.
Yep. They would have somebody play the piano, and we had a community sing brown booklet. I don't know if any of those exist anymore. And because it was still the war, we sang things like When Johnny Comes Marching Home, Pack Up Your Troubles in the Old Kit Bag, You Are My Sunshine. But the favorite was Camptown races. Doo-dah, doo-dah. I could still sing it, but I won't bother you with that. We also need to talk about how the dump road became the dump road, which is one of my favorite stories. Gordon Clark lived down the road. Probably he should have been on Orchard, but he got listed as being number 1 dump road. Is that the way it went?
I named it.
You named it.
I owned that house before my brother did.
Okay. Yep. Anyway, back to the dump. The dump is one of the more interesting things. When I was young, it was a big hole in the ground, and somebody was hired with a truck, and he came out. Mind you, there are no plastic bags. You put your garbage maybe in a brown bag, maybe you wrapped it in newspaper, you put it in your garbage can, and the garbage truck came and they took it, threw it on the truck, and then several 8-year-olds or so would shovel the garbage into the dump. And that's where it stayed. I don't...
Still is.
No, I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't know if they ever covered it with... Did they ever cover it with dirt?
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
They had an incinerator up past the dump,
Oh, and they burned it?
and they burned some of it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know what else to tell you, except that today, I did say that about the anniversary? Yep. I had a big job in the war effort. We were all very much against Japan, and my job was to pick the Japanese beetles off the rose bush and put them in kerosene. And I sincerely thought I was doing something for the war effort, because they were, after all, Japanese. I can answer maybe some questions.
I have a couple already.
Uh-oh.
So was the Victory Garden a community garden or a backyard garden?
No, the Victory Gardens were in a town, and if you lived in Hackensack, you could get a Victory Garden plot. And what you put in it, or what you grew, my favorite was growing radishes or carrots, because you could pull them up to see if they were ripe, if they were ready to eat.
And you said the buses came up to the parking lot. I've never heard buses bringing people. Oh, yeah. Where did they come from?
Everywhere.
Wow.
Well, there were no other. Suntan Lake was, I don't know that wasn't available in 1945, though, was it? Suntan Lake was down on 23 opposite Cedar Crest.
Yeah. I don't know.
You think it was there?
It was there.
That was there in the 1990s.
But they would come to Suntan Lake and so forth from New York City.
There were a lot of lakes along Route
Kathy, there's the sign in the stand that says the buses. There's a sign about the buses. I can't remember what it said, but I remember.
And do you remember when the fence was out, where the public, you want to talk about that a little?
Jim?
Well, the stand
from the beach out into the water.
Yeah.
And what we call those folks was picnickers. They had to stay on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
And us, we thought people would be on the other side.
And they were called the what?
Picnickers.
The picnickers stayed on one side of the fence, and the villagers stayed on the other side. Wow.
And the villagers very seldom went to the beach because
Yeah.
people from the outside
Yeah.
had to hate to use that.
Yeah.
So everybody swam off the dock.
Docks. The docks were big. If you lived on Sunnyside, you swam off of Sunnyside Dock. Yeah. Other questions?
How did your family find Green Pond?
Unfair question. My grandmother came here for a tent revival, and they were in the field between Cliffside and Bonnie Bray. And when they eventually dug storm drains, they buried their garbage there. And we dug up, bottle after bottle after bottle. Philip Smoke of Magnesia bottles, the blue bottles, was very popular. And Heinz's must have been popular because we got Heinz's pickle jars. And don't remember what else. But she was here, I guess, in the 1910 or so. They used to have, it was, I think, anybody know what was Methodist? Methodist. Yeah, it was Methodist. Revivals and tent meetings and stuff. Anything else? Yes?
How did you end up on the West Shore?
My husband, well, this is a nice story. I won't say the name, but there was a lady that was on the beach who had a very loud voice and she never stopped talking. And my husband said, I don't like going to the beach. So I said, well, I don't think we can afford the East Shore, but we can afford the West Shore. So we went and bought on the West Shore, just to get away from the loud lady, who was a prominent person in Green Pond. Yeah, you can wonder about that one. Yeah.
We were also sharing a house with my grandmother and my Aunt Susie and my brother and my mom, my dad. It was kind of small.
Well, it was, 6. Yeah, for 3 bedrooms. My son slept in the dining room, and you slept in the room with your grandmother. Yeah, it was cozy. But that's the way it was in Green Pond.
Do you remember anything about the 1933 diving dock that's on the map? It was way down past Seven Sisters.
Down by Lake End.
Diving platform.
Yeah, it was built for the hotel, basically.
For Shogers? For,
Built it past Seven Sisters.
Right. That was built for the Green Pond Hotel people? Or Shawgers? Was that for Shawgers people or Green Pond Hotel people?
Both.
Okay.
There was a stop also on the booze run to Shaw's Hotel.
And then it burned up too.
What happened to it? Nobody knows.
I don't know.
Nobody. They took it down. Because all the kids were hanging out. Partying. They thought it was
yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Do you remember a road across the beach? Or any way across the beach by vehicle?
Vehicles were not allowed on the beach, ever. You may be thinking about the part that the stone house is on. That was owned by the Van Deens. And the Van Deens built, and then they gave it to the Ribbons family. And there was a road, a driveway, really, but it didn't go across the beach, it went perpendicular. And they owned those 3 houses there.
From what I understand about that road, it was a horse and buggy road in front of the current beach, and after they dammed the back and the water level came up, it was still technically there because somebody, and I don't know who it was, once a year rode his horse and carriage through there to make it an active road on the books. But yeah, I have heard about that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
There was an extension from Dead End Road,
Dead End
right
Road.
across the
Dead
beach.
End right across.
And then it came up Little Lane and up over the, and up over the mountain and all that. So that was a long time ago. You
Priscilla?
probably wouldn't remember it.
How large was the swamp? Did the swamp go back into what
We never went. We picked blueberries back in there a little bit, but it was wet.
Quicksand, 'cause when I was a kid, we were singing it, but I'm wondering how far back it went when Morris Park.
I have no memory of it. Russ?
Do you remember
Well,
that?
you have to go back to the road. It was a farm road that came across the mountain, down Knott's Road. And the people and the farmers went across in front of what I call the Danker House. It's a stone house. That was Dr. Ribbons.
Yeah, Dr. Ribbons, yep.
And there was a fight that was even going on in the 70s. I was there. About Johnson said that they had the right to the lake through that access
Oh,
road. And Judge Weber, who was our attorney, fought them on that. And as part of the negotiations of purchasing the Johnson farm,
okay.
they finally gave up their rights, but they were paid.
Oh, okay. Oh, a note about the second beach. I had a friend who lived on Oak Lane.
Yes.
There wasn't a light. You had to walk past that woods, swamp, whatever it was, all by yourself with your flashlight. As scary as it could possibly be.
That was owned by the Hardicks.
Melanie, talk about security.
Security?
Yeah.
Oh, we did have, Charlie the cop lived right over there. We were all terrified of, and there was Harry Cornell. We had a few that lived here on Green Pond, and it was nice.
They used to chase us out of the Heavenly Rest and get up to this.
Well, yes, that's a whole different story. I didn't talk about Heavenly Rest. Heavenly Rest was the female boarding house for the waitresses who worked in the hotel. And the men originally stayed very close here. It was called Stagger Inn because of the condition that they were in when they got off of work, I guess. And that later became the Field House, which doesn't exist anymore. Any more questions? One more.
When did the horse ranch disappear? Was that like in the late 50s or remember when there were horses up here?
No, I don't remember it. Anybody remember horses up here?
There was the barn was right here, but that was back in the 20s.
Right down here.
Okay.
Right there. Right before, the greenhouse was the barn. We have pictures of it.
Okay.
That in the newsletter.
Okay.
All right. I don't know about you folks, I thought that was outstanding. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
That was great. I'm gonna get her back again.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.